Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
It's a new year. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly, and we're live. We are live. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. Broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. There's a link to all of your instructors on the website. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Thank you so much, Nathan, for all your hard work and excellence in broadcasting. Captain John Ragan's with us. Welcome, Captain John Ragan.
Good morning and Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to our entire broadcast classroom worldwide. It's great to be on the air. We took about a week off, John, so we missed a Monday or so, and it's great to be with you. So, John, 17 days toward bliss. I understand that Barry and the bandits will be leaving town in 17 days. And he's the guy that took the word hope and turned it into fear. It'd be great to see him playing more golf. Not seeing him, but not even hearing about him playing golf. It'll be great to have him playing golf and not causing problems worldwide. What do you think?
We can only hope that he'd fade off, but yeah, it looks like he's wanting to be more into community organizing to help disrupt this country.
Yeah, he's done a great job of disrupting this country and placing fear in the hearts of so many people. I was talking to one of our instructors a few days ago, and he was telling me about a man he knows who supports the Obama regime, Obama and Hillary and that kind of ilk. And this guy is really afraid. He said he's literally afraid of what's going to happen with the President-elect Donald Trump. I can't believe that he's more concerned about President-elect Donald Trump and what he might do compared to what Barry and Hillary have done and would do if they were in a position to do more damage. Interesting thing about that is I wonder about the people who supported Barry and continued to support him and Hillary. I wonder how much on the take they are. They have got to be on the take to support that regime. There's no other explanation other than stupidity. It's the only thing I can think of.
Unfortunately, there is. It's called evil.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. I'm with you. You know, I was looking at today's class, and hour number 1, we've got Santa Claus could be jailed for the following. And then steps to challenge Donald Trump. 17 days. What can they do to challenge him? And then, driving under the influence. Not of alcohol, but caffeine. And Hillary, the question about a pardon for Hillary. And then being arrested and being charged. Not with a crime. Being arrested and then charged for being arrested. Charged Federal Reserve Unit denominations. And then fighting at school. And the penalty that's going to, well, it's already started. That's just hour number one today, John. I'm at the financialstateoftheunion.com, clicked on the news tab, and that's what you've got posted for hour number one.
And let me just share a couple of things that I haven't put on there. It comes out of Today in History, and I was looking at yesterday's, and it's kind of coincidental. Yesterday in 1863 was the day that President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. The funny thing there is he declared the slaves in a foreign country known as the Confederate States of America to be free, but he didn't free the slaves in the United States of America. But people don't like to talk about that. And just so happens that was also the day in 1808 that a law prohibiting the importation of slaves into the United States went into effect. So there we are, more than 50 years before the Civil War, where the United States had already taken steps to start, at least slowing down slavery. And the Industrial Revolution was actually in the way of putting the slave business out of business for agriculture, at least for the most part. Of course, we still use them today. We call them migrant workers that get paid very little to do hard work. And because of the new revolution, we're going to have machines take over, and we won't even need those slaves anymore. Of course, we won't need them for fast food or for driving or for being doctors or lawyers or CPAs, but it's great. And then I was looking at today's and realizing just how things have changed. It was on this day in 1960 that Senator Kennedy announced his candidacy for the Democratic presidential nomination. And you think that, November 1960 is when the election was. And in our modern age, where we have so many more ways of communicating, we end up having 4 years of campaigning practically.
It's interesting you say you're talking about slavery. And I was thinking as you were saying that, I had a discussion with an attorney, a lawyer, someone I disliked in the Commonwealth of Virginia many years ago. And he was telling me, I was looking at his property, and it was really manicured. And I said, wow, it's level, it's cleared, it's, one of the nicest properties around. He said, yeah. During the Great Depression, his family paid $5 an acre to clear land. $5 an acre. An acre is roughly 200 feet by 200 feet. And they would pay $5 to cut all the trees, saw them up, stack them, move them, and pull out the stumps. $5. Now, we're not talking about chainsaws. We're talking about two-man saws, one man on each end, and hand saws. That's slavery as well, John.
Yeah, of course, we've talked about recently where even though we have a constitutional amendment that prohibits involuntary servitude, except for prison, voluntary servitude is perfectly constitutional and practiced every day. Just sign on the dotted line. Monthly payments are.
Yeah. I think I was thrown out of a store over the weekend it was not exactly, get out, get out, get out. It wasn't exactly quite like that. But I had difficulty understanding the transaction. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. So I bought some oil. It was on sale for $40 a bucket. Bucket's 5 gallons. And I bought this oil for our tractors. And farmers are entitled to be tax exempt when they use products on the farm. So I bought 5 gallon buckets of motor oil, 5 gallon buckets of hydraulic fluid. And the owner's manual of the tractor says that you use diesel engine oil in the transmission and the hydraulic units of these particular tractors. And so I also get a 5% discount for being a senior citizen. But that's on Wednesdays. So I timed my purchase, and it was about a $20 discount for being a senior citizen. So I went through the line, and the gal that helped me, that's in quotes, was miserable, offensive, just impossible to deal with. And I didn't get my 5% discount. So I called back. When I got home, I said, I didn't get my 5% discount. They said, just come on back. So I went back on Friday. And I looked around, and darn it, the only person that had a register open was the same gal. And I looked to go to some other register. I did not want to deal with her again. So I said, I bought this from you on Wednesday, and I didn't get my senior citizen's discount. She gave me the scowl. And then she proceeded to bang on the keyboard. And it's a full-size keyboard register. And she was typing and typing. And a line started forming behind me. And the line was getting longer. And it was taking like 5 minutes, and she was still typing, and then she needed some help. and she was annoyed with me. And finally, after about 8 minutes, she said, sign this. And I said, what did you do? Because I saw you typing for 8 minutes or so. I have no idea what you did. She said, sign this, and this, and this. 3 receipts. So I signed them, no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. She said, what are you doing? I said, I have no idea. She was so mad at me, she grabbed them, handed me my cash, if you will. Captain John Ragan's with us, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. So, John, I signed these 3 receipts in really large sized letters, John Hancock style. I have no idea. And, John, we have become slaves to businesses. It's really hard to do things our way. We've got to do it their way. And where I live, there aren't a lot of choices of where I can go. So I've got to talk to the store manager. And my plan is to go see him or go talk to him this week. But this gal said to me, I'm in line talking to everybody in line. The line's getting longer, and I'm thinking, gee, this is terrible. It looks like this is all my fault because she didn't give me the 5% discount, and I was there getting it, and I was tying everybody up, and it was taking her forever, and she was really, really, really annoyed with me, and so I said to her, just before I left. And everybody's watching me. I said, if I were your boss, I'd fire you. And everybody heard me say it. I didn't yell it at her. I just said it matter-of-factly. And she looked at me and she said, what, for explaining to you? I said, no. And actually, she hardly explained anything. I said, no, for having the personality of an ogre. And the definition of an ogre is... according to the internet, a hideous giant of fairy tales and folklore that feeds on human beings. A monster, a dreaded person, or object. And she was a dreaded person. I didn't want to get in her line. As a matter of fact, if I went back in that store and she were the only person at a register, if I had to go to her register, I'd leave. And that's what I'm going to tell the owner or the manager of the store. That, people in positions of working with the general public need to be polite and they need to be nice. Otherwise, they're going to lose customers. And the guy before me, before I even said a word, before I even got up to the register, he was waiting and waiting and waiting. He looked at this gal. He was a senior citizen in overalls. Farmer, obviously a farmer. White hair. He said to the gal, "You having a bad day?" That was his take. His take was, she's obviously not happy and having a bad day. And she's taking it out on them. And then it was my turn for her to take it out on me. So I object to it, and I'm not going to spend my money. I'm going to vote with my wallet. And and I guess that's because I heard the story about my son. My son was thrown out of a supermarket. I guess I'll tell the story really quickly. It was Christmas time, and he was in line, and the people in front of him had a lot of items to be rung up, and there was the family of them, and they were just adults, and they were just watching and not doing anything. And the line was getting longer and longer and longer, and my son was next in line. He said, it would be helpful if you would help bag the things that you bought. You could help the cashier and bag them. My son was thrown out of the store. He's banned from the store for 30 days. So I would not let my son outdo me. So that was my response several days later at the register. John, do you have any comments?
Well, let me just put one in the good news category.
Yeah.
I've got a 1999 Dodge Grand Caravan, and the air bypass hose, which is what goes from the air filter to the engine, it's probably original equipment and broken too. Mm-hmm. And I go to an O'Reilly's, which is, headquartered there in Springfield, and go in, and I did have to wait a little bit because they only had two people on the counter, but when the guy got to me, he had problems trying to find a replacement part for it, so he said, "Just mail me so I could find something in back," and he ended up finding a bit of hose out of the salvage and put it on the car for me, no charge.
Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? And I have an account with O'Reilly's, and they treat me pretty well. There you go. And it's up to the individual. And that guy was nice to you. Good job, O'Reilly's. We'll be right back. Captain John Ragan's with us, U.S. Air Force Reserves retired. Website, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com or eze33.org. John, when I was a high school student and I worked at an independent auto parts store, very much the size of an O'Reilly's type store, an AutoZone type store, but it was independent. It was not a chain. Customers would come in, and I would do exactly what you talked about. And do you know that business went up about 25% just from doing those little things? Helping people, going out to the car, looking under the hood with them, saying, "You know what, I've got a piece of hose here. Hey, it's less than a foot long, no charge." And glad to be able to do that. Or if someone bought a set of spark plugs, I'd give them a feeler gauge, one of those round disc feeler gauges to set the gap on the spark plug. I'd show them how to use it. And I'd say, I'd just take it right off the rack, and it would say, I don't know, whatever the price was, 75 cents or something, or $1. I'd say, "Well, here, you're going to need this." And I just give it to them. Now, of course, I was violating all kinds of policies, but the store couldn't believe that sales went up 25%. And it's just by an attitude toward customers and helping customers and just being nice. So I'm glad to hear that story about O'Reilly's. There's not much good news, but that was a nice touch. The guy went out of his way, went in the back. As a matter of fact, John, when I go to O'Reilly's, sometimes I say, when it comes time to cutting hose, if like I needed a length of hose, and I said to the guy, you know what? It'd probably be easier if I came back there and, we picked it out together. And so we looked through all the hose reels, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, I could use 5 feet of this, and just in case, let me get 5 feet of this other hose. So instead of just buying 5 feet, I bought 10 feet. It worked for him. It worked for me. I got what I needed, and I was able to fix the vehicle. So being nice doesn't cost much, does it?
Well, Santa Claus might not agree.
This is a good story. This is a good story.
Santa Claus is going to jail. And this just lists 5 laws. There's many more. The first that's listed is the Reindeer Act. Basically, only Eskimos, Indians, and Inuits inhabiting Alaska at the time that the United States purchased land for Russia are considered natives, and they're pretty much the only ones allowed to own reindeer. That's not enough. There's the Lacey Act, where the purchase, sale, possession, or use of reindeer or any other flora or fauna that violates any state or federal law or the law of any foreign nation, no matter what the language or code that foreign law is written in, you've got problems. Of course, then there's the flying without a license. Making false statements is a federal crime, so you have to be careful on that too. And there was a note in this paragraph where Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg observed that under these federal false statement statutes, if you had a prosecutor that was unable to make a criminal case, but got the suspect to give a false denial about those acts, that you've got a crime for him. And then, of course, if the gift is big enough, there's the IRS gift tax, and that doesn't even get into labor laws and things such as that. OSHA. And yeah, good luck being Santa Claus nowadays.
Yeah, John, did you read a story about in November, late November, 80,000 reindeer have starved to death in Siberia because of melting sea ice?
Right, the water froze over and they couldn't get to what they normally eat, and they starved to death. Right,
80,000. 80,000. Absolutely horrible. What's next?
Well, I don't think I want to mention his name. He's you'd recognize him. He's a filmmaker. Has 5 steps for challenging Trump. And what's really crazy about so many of these people that hate Trump, whether it's Hollywood or the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, is they don't know what fascism is. And what they're getting is so far from that. They've been pretty much living under fascism these last 16 years. We give them an alternative and they complain they're getting fascism. But it gets me that these loving leftists are doing all of this, and yet totally silent against what the next article, but quiet about this. We had a 30-year-old woman beheaded in Afghanistan for entering a city to go shopping without her husband. So they're spending all this energy because they hate Trump, and yet do nothing for other atrocities.
Yeah, you're talking about slavery before, and sounds like a form of slavery to me that women don't necessarily have, or women throughout the world do not have many of the freedoms that women in the United States have. It's not against the law for a wife to go shopping without her husband. It's not against the law. Even if she were to do something stupid, like, buy that new Corvette that sometimes guys do. They say, hey, honey, look, will you see what I just bought you? It's not even a crime to be stupid in the United States. And I'm really looking forward to 17 days from now. I really am. John, are we going to talk about in the next couple of days, are we going to talk about what's happened to preparedness? Is that something that we'll be talking about?
That's actually, we've got some for hour 2 today.
Great.
But, talking about everything that this administration is doing, some of it can be undone easily, but what he did in the UN is outrageous, not vetoing the resolution against Israel. And next up, which comes on the 15th, just days before the inauguration, there's a meeting in France where on the table is to divide Israel into 2 countries. And these are things that would not be easy for Trump to undo. And, of course, they're also nice for nudging the world into war. But that's the way these narcissists, globalists are. And if that's not enough to get you DUI, California man arrested and charged for driving under the influence, 0% blood alcohol content, came back negative for all illegal drugs, but he did test positive for caffeine. So
who doesn't test positive for caffeine? What if a person has a chocolate bar?
I just wonder if, especially since it's California, if they're just not going to have police cars lined up outside of Starbucks.
We reported on something kind of like that, John. What some of the cops are doing in Missouri is when people are at a bar or tavern at night, some of the cops will go out and they will put a reflective spray paint on the tire of a car or tires of cars at the bar or tavern. And then they wait down the road, the direction where most of the people who leave the bar or tavern would be traveling. And they see the reflective paint that they just put on the tire going down the road. And those are the cars they pull over. Why not pull them over, right? Because, hey, they were just at that bar. How do they know? Because they just painted those tires with reflective paint. Yeah. That's what they do here in Missouri. And I'm sure it's not just Missouri. I'm sure that the Show Me State wasn't smart enough to think of that all by ourselves. I'm sure that gets passed around in the plague circles. Here's a great way. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to talk about is enforcement. Enforcement has become a revenue stream, as we've been saying. It is a revenue stream. And certain localities, cities, depend on tickets for operational revenue. It's an outrage. It's an outrage. Please continue, John.
What really may be an outrage, there's still plenty of time for Obama to pardon Hillary. He's got some problems here because he's complicit in a lot of the things that she did, and he's not in a position, so far as we know, where he could pardon himself. But for those that think that, maybe there might be some loophole that might not be covered, we've got what was used to pardon Nixon back then, and the way it was phrased is to grant a full, free, and absolute pardon. This is for Richard Nixon for all offenses committed against the United States for which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 20th, 1969 through August 9th, 1974. So if a similar declaration is written up, then literally all of her crimes could go unpunished.
What an outrage that is. Absolutely. You know, there are a lot of people who would be very thrilled to see her spend time in the Crossbar Hotel. I don't think there's even a shortage of people who would be thrilled at seeing that. Captain John Ragan and I'll be right back for the final segment of this hour, and then we'll be continuing for the next hour. TheFinancialStateOfTheUnion.com. John, you know, we're talking about this California man who was arrested for driving under the influence. He had his blood drawn. He was taken to jail. They took his blood so they could test it for drugs, illegal substances, and the test came back negative for all illegal drugs. Now, if I were arrested for that, I would be concerned that the test would be altered and they'd find some way of saying it was positive for illegal drugs, although it wouldn't be. Well, this man's test came back negative for illegal drugs, but it says here in this post that you have on linked on your website, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, that the California Legal Code specifies that a drug is any substance other than alcohol that could impair a person's driving. But there's no precedent for caffeine negatively affecting a person's ability to drive. In fact, it's quite the opposite, as caffeine is marketed in gas stations across the country as increasing alertness while on the roadways. Now, if you extrapolate this and you say impaired, well, that would be probably any medication that a person could be on, even medications prescribed by their physicians. And if you want to extrapolate it even further, let's talk about cell phones and the impairing effects of cell phones on driving. So I'd rather not see people use cell phones when they're behind the wheel. I think it's dangerous for everybody around them, including themselves. But caffeine, this goes back to municipalities doing everything they can to find people for whatever reason they can figure out to find them. It's an outrage. People have been drinking coffee for decades to improve their alertness when they're behind the wheel. That's what they do.
But don't worry, there's a simple solution. All you got to do is yield to the self-driving cars.
Wow. John, did you read that post on the internet that talked about anyone born today will not drive an automobile? They won't be driving.
I had not seen that, but
by the time they're 17, 18, there will be no vehicles that to drive. And that really bothers me because I remember building a go-kart as a very, very young teenager, with a small lawnmower engine on it. I made a board, put an axle on it, and I steered this thing with my feet. I built a brake, which was just a stick that was on a pivot, and I dragged that against the ground, and that would slow me down. It had a clutch on it that was a centrifugal clutch that, as the engine went faster, the clutch would engage. But, it was pretty primitive, no question about it. And but it worked. The frame was a piece of shelf board. It literally worked. The wheels were from a lawnmower. And from there, I was interested in driving a vehicle on the road. My first vehicle was a Jeep, a Willys 1950s Willys Jeep with a snowplow. And I worked on that. I saved my money cutting lawns until I had enough money, $675 to buy this Jeep. And I worked, years. Finally got enough money. And this was before my 17th birthday. Bought this Jeep. And I was really looking forward to driving on the road, operating that Jeep on the road. And that's something we all look forward to, right? Getting your license. John, didn't you look forward to that? Can you imagine?
Yeah, the year between 15 and 16 was very long.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. And boy, what a disappointment what it would be if a person failed his permit test. Can you imagine that? And having to wait months to get another appointment. That was something we all look forward to. And is that being taken away from young people? That's a shame. That's a shame. We'll be right back. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares with Captain John Ragan. His website, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. I've clicked on the news tab, and I'm following along in class. You may do the same. John, I was looking at, we didn't get through hour number 1, all my fault. Are you going to talk about the innocence fee?
If we have time, I'm going to go ahead and get into hour number 2.
Okay.
As you know, after the election, Trump had a lot of people come in. Some were interviewing and some were probably sharing information. And Goldman Sachs was probably one of those sharing information. So this SITREP situation report, as it's called, the article itself is, not reporting an actual event, but it's probably pretty close to information that was shared. And scrolling down a few paragraphs, it says, I'll briefly touch on 9 topics. The most important are deficits, debt, reporting, war, perception, stocks, money creation, currency, and precious metals. Basically the things that we've talked about here over the years. And it goes into discussion in each of those areas. So if you want to have a nice little article to try and summarize how things are, this is a pretty good one.
You want to give us a thumbnail on some of these items?
Wow. Well, we could easily take an hour to a show on these, but we know that the deficits even themselves are a lie, because what they report on is the budget deficit, and that's not all there is, and that's why you end up with more debt every year than what the deficit is.
Mm-hmm.
And even the debt is a lie, because it doesn't include everything. The unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare are the biggest ones that we're looking at for the federal government. But they even lie about the nature of the debt. They'll tell you that it's less than 100% of GDP because it's, the debt owed to the public is a smaller amount. However, most of that difference is the Social Security and Medicare so-called trust funds, where in order to be able to pay those out to people, they actually have to make that debt owed to the public just in order to get the cash to pay it out. So the lovely government lies there. And one thing I did like about this was looking at another way, because people think, well, maybe we can grow our way out of this. And the paragraph in this starts out, some like to think that we can grow our way out of the deficits and debt. And assuming a 4% GDP growth, which is more than what we've had the last 8 years, it's been under 3%. And if you assume an 18 trillion economy, which we've talked about GDP and how that's a fake number too, but let's give them the full amount. A 4% growth to an 18 trillion economy is an additional $720 billion a year for year one. And the assumption here assumes you collect taxes on 25% of that. Well, let's assume you can just collect taxes on 100% of that. Tax all the gains, $720 billion. Well, that isn't even going to cover the increase in debt for the year, much less make a difference to our unfunded liabilities. The reporting lies, everything they report, whether it's unemployment, GDP, it's all a fabrication. And, you've got shadow stats saying that if the government just recorded unemployment the way they used to, that the unemployment rate would be 24%. I think they might overcorrect a little bit, but I think that still put unemployment at around 20%, which is pretty darn close to depression levels.
Mm-hmm.
And
so would you say that for young people the American dream is over?
It is so over. And the reason I say that is just government spending and debt is enough that requires more than 100% of income. And that's if you want to just keep Social Security and Medicare from getting worse. If you actually wanted to do something about it, that's another impossible situation. So what do you call it when somebody requires more than 100% of your income? I mean, it's certainly beyond slavery, because even slaves got room and board and medical care, because, a sick dead slave doesn't do very much work, You read about the peons in Europe, I think the most they had taken was maybe 20 or 25%. I'll have to research that, but, you don't want the peasants revolting. And yet here we are, government needs more than 100% of your income. And, when you get somebody elected that, if it were possible to do something with, would probably do it, everybody's up in arms against them. It's an insane world we live in.
When I was growing up, John, my dad taught me about debt. And he taught me that it's really tough if you buy something on debt and then try to pay for it later. If you can't afford it now, it's going to be tough to afford it later when you have whatever the cost of it was plus interest. So it's going to cost more later than it costs now because of the cost of debt. So I avoided debt at all turns. Were you taught the same thing?
Pretty much so. My parents grew up during the Great Depression, so I had a closer relationship to that than most of the people I went to school with. Pretty much, I'd say well over 90% of people I went to school with, it was their grandparents that grew up during World War II and the Depression. Whereas my parents actually, my mother was almost 21 when Pearl Harbor happened, and my dad was already in the Army. He was 3 years older. They didn't even know each other at the time, but so many people I went to school with, their parents were, basically teenagers during the World War II years. They were here at home and having to suffer the austerity and that goes along with war, but they what's happening now is the youngsters don't know what life was like before. I think it'd be a great reality show if we took a bunch of millennials and made them live in a 1962 era home, it would drive them crazy without the computers, without the phones with email or with voicemail, and having black and white TV with 3 channels. You had to get up and walk across the room to change and adjust the antenna. I just wonder how long the show could go on before they go completely crazy. And of course, with what we're expecting, with an EMP attack, it'd be far worse than that.
Very interesting that you're saying these things. I know here at the farmhouse that we have a tool that you would insert into a sock, a men's sock. And you could repair a hole that your big toe might have poked through your sock, okay, with this tool. And what it's like it's kind of egg-shaped with a handle on the end. It's made out of wood. It was made on a lathe, probably in the 1920s. And you just put this into a sock, and then it bulges out the end, and that gives you a surface on which you can darn your socks with thread and fill in those holes. And that was common. That was common back then, darning socks. Now, we don't even know what that means, darning a sock, right? We just throw them away. Get a hole in them, throw them away. During the Depression, that would never happen because the sock was perfectly good except for the hole. And all you had to do was fix the hole. As a matter of fact, John, I remember my mom taking apart my dad was a school teacher, and he wore white shirts too, and a principal back in the 50s. And he would wear a white shirt and a tie and a jacket to work. People used to dress up to go to work. And the shirts would last longer than the collars. So you could go to a tailor and have a new collar put on your shirt. They'd make a new collar for you. So why buy a whole new shirt when just the collar is frayed and worn out? That's what people did. We wouldn't even think of that anymore, would we, John?
and that's just in maintenance. If you look at just normal daily life and chores, I was reading where fabric softener sales are down because millennials don't know what fabric softener is for.
Okay. Captain John Ragan, I'll be right back. John, what are we going to talk about in the next segment?
Let's talk about libraries.
Okay. Libraries. I'm going there right now. I've just clicked on it. Stranger Than Fiction, The Secret Apartments Hidden Inside New York's public libraries. We'll be right back. Yes, I'm all excited. Captain John Ragan and I have so much to talk about. We're going to be spending today and tomorrow with you. So Monday and Tuesday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. Captain John Ragan, U.S. Air Force Reserves, retired. John, libraries. This is unbelievable.
And I have the link, Libraries Post Poop Hits the Props. And you might wonder, with everything going on in the world today, why would I put up an article about these old abandoned custodial apartments in New York City? Well, the answer lies in the second paragraph. That these were people were tasked with keeping the library's coal furnaces going 24 hours a day to keep the books from spoiling in the cold and the damp. And we are so spoiled today. We look at everything we have as if things have always been that way. The ability for people to have books is really a modern phenomena. And then keeping them stored typically in places that have central heat and air where it's climate controlled. These books tend to last quite a bit of our lifetime, if not beyond. However, when you don't have that central heat and air, it becomes a different, truly a different environment. And I don't know if you've experienced going into a house that doesn't have electricity and especially when it gets to be that point where it's going into the colder months and it's warmer on the inside than the outside, and you get that condensation. And moisture is bad for books. It helps mold to form, and then that mold will eat the books. And then on top of that, most of this paper is not neutral. It's a bit acidic, so over time, the paper will degrade, and that's why back in olden times, you have the scribes that would take the books, which were typically on scrolls, and make a copy. You didn't have a Xerox machine or a printer back then, and we're probably going to end up in that type of environment. And I don't think very many people are considering that something they're going to have to deal with. And if you're expecting to just go into a library and take a bunch of books 2 or 3 years down the road, you may be well too late in being able to recover anything.
Really good point, John. This morning I was walking to the studio through the farmhouse, and our son left a single lens reflex camera with me, 35 millimeter, and I passed it on the way into the studio. And I thought, wow, the digital era has destroyed the photographic film business for the most part. Who today uses a single lens reflex camera, 35 millimeter, where you focus it manually and you select the shutter speed, either an automatic shutter speed and an f-stop, or manually or automatically have your camera do it for you? Who does that and then winds the film back into the film canister and then takes the film to a developer and then has prints made? Who does that? Hardly anybody, right? And what we do is we take pictures with these digital cameras and then we save them onto our PCs, and the hard drives fail, and then we lose the pictures, or we just forget where they are, and we just take so many pictures it's hard to even count them or categorize them. So I have a feeling that there are some disadvantages, seriously some disadvantages, to not having hard copies, having electronic copies. I bought an electronic copy of a manual for some of our vehicles. I can't get it to work. I followed the instructions completely. It's really great because I've got all the information I need, except I can't access it. Now compare that to a Haynes or a Chilton manual that I can just open the pages and find what I need and get on with what I'm trying to fix. But wouldn't that be nice? Nope. Now it's so complicated we need electronic manuals because the volume of material is so great. And how long is that electronic edition going to be with us? I don't know. How long do those 3.5-inch floppy and 5.25-inch floppy disks last? Captain John Ragan's with us. John, what's next?
Prepping is at RIP.
Wow.
And it also links to a similar article. Now that we've had the election, so many people think that, at least on one side, that Trump is going to fix everything. You have the half that just lost power that think everything's going down the drain, but they're looking at a different direction. But I've not read, I guess, except one article where prepping has pretty dried up quite a bit, with the exception of gun sales for those on the left who now all of a sudden think guns are a good thing that Trump's been elected. But when, just from what I look at, there's nothing Trump can do to change the position we're in. We've still got the same unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare. We still have the unfunded pension plans, and it looks like interest rates are going to continue to go up. And even if they don't, that's more bad news for pension funds. And there's just not enough money to fix these things. So regardless of who's in the office, go ahead.
You're talking about prepping, and has it slowed down? There's no question in my mind. I believe it has. I keep hearing that there are more and more, we'll call them preppers, coming out of the woodwork every day, and I think that's true. But I really believe that prepping has slowed down. I don't see people with shopping carts as full of as many long-term storage type foods as before. I don't see people buying in bulk the way they did before. I've been to gun shows, and I don't see the hand trucks, coming out of the gun shows filled with ammunition supplies. I don't see that. I don't see people buying ammunition cans, the 30 caliber and 50 caliber ammo cans. I even talked to some of our contacts in the long-term food storage world. And I said to one of our instructors, I don't see the sales of long-term storage food as I did in the past. I don't see the commercials running on broadcast, whether they be ours or whoever's, as I did in the past. I think sales are down. And he said, you're right. They are down. And they're down in a pretty significant way. I think there's a sense of hope. And, Obama killed the word hope for me. But in the old meaning of the word hope, I think that Donald Trump, what he's been saying, has resonated with those who are concerned about the Obama regime and the Hillary regime and what more damage they would do, and the fear that they've unleashed in the United States and actually worldwide. And people were really preparing for the worst. And now there's this feeling that, with a lot of people, that everything's going to be fine. It's going to be great. It's all going to be fixed. I don't quite see it that way. I'm still concerned. I'm still preparing. I'm still fixing and repairing everything that I can to make sure that as many things that we need to have working actually do work. But I think that there is a dramatic decline in the preparedness world. No question in my mind. I've done seminars and I've asked people about, preparing and they're interested, but, they still think everything's going to be okay. Too many of them think everything's going to be okay. And they've turned a blind eye to, as you mentioned, EMPs, a blind eye to radiation, a blind eye to the weather, a blind eye to supply chain problems. Just look at Venezuela, right? Look what's happening there. And then look at England. Look at what happened over New Year's in England. These young people in drunken stupors, vomiting on the streets. These what maybe used to be pretty girls, all scarred for life with tattoos and piercings and writings and engraved on their skin. I mean, they're beyond stupid. And that's what they've done to themselves. And they're going out, getting rip-roaring drunk, falling down the streets. The streets are just trashed. It's filth, at least the images I'm seeing. And why would people do that? It's a shame, John. It really is a shame how far we have fallen and are continuing to fall. And as far as preparedness, you can't be rip-roaring drunk in a drunken stupor and look forward to that and also be of a preparedness mindset at the same time. I don't think that's possible. I think one mindset is one of someone who's foolhardy, and the other is someone who is conscientious. And I don't think they can coexist in the same person. Not at the same time anyway.
Well, the next article talks about that tornado that went just 3 miles from me the day after Christmas in 2015. And there was a report here locally what things were like a year later. So here we are, the world's still normal, as normal as things can be. You still have a working economy. You still got, insurance companies. And a year later, we still have quite a few people where this tornado went through that still do not have their homes restored. About 75% are reoccupied. And you think in, today's America, why wouldn't you have 100% in a year?
Right. Right, because we've got machines, we've got excavators, we've got bulldozers, we've got cranes, we've got scaffolding, we've got a supply chain for brick and mortar and nails and wood, and we've got sawmills, and we've got roofing products, we've got wiring products and plumbing products, insulation. What's the problem, right? Why don't we just bang this out?
And you're talking about how the world's not the way it used to be. Mm-hmm. And the next article comes from Dave Hodges, and it's entitled, "What Percentage of Men Would Have Sex with a Complete Stranger?" And they ran this test, and they got their answer. 30% would.
30% would. Okay, so 70% said no. And John, there's a lot of risk in that. A lot of risk. HIV, sexually transmitted disease. Maybe that complete stranger has a boyfriend who is really jealous and has a quick trigger. I mean, those are just some of the risks, right?
Right.
I don't know. And then we've got the moral issues. And I was talking about England and New Year's, and it looks like these people these girls were so drunk they wouldn't even know if they had sex with a stranger. At least that was my opinion. These girls were wearing really, really short skirts. The wind would blow them higher than they probably don't even care. They probably didn't even know how high the wind blew their skirts. Man, I wouldn't want a daughter living in my house doing that kind of thing. That would stop right away. Man. Really good point. How far we've fallen. 30% of men would have sex with a complete stranger. I wonder if that survey were done in Washington, what the answer would be. Would it be 100% right now? And then what if the question were how many men would have sex with a complete strange man? I wonder what that number would be in Washington. Or woman. Wow.
And I think we're going to find out if the question were, what if it were a child? That you're going to get a much higher percent than you would hope for.
Yeah.
Well, let's turn to the cheery job market. We have a top ex-White House economist saying that 94% of all the new jobs under Obama were part-time. And that's even, stretching the term part-time. You define it as temporary help, on-call, contract, independent contractors, and freelancers. Well, so in other words, roughly 6% of the jobs that we got under this administration were what we would have considered the ordinary full-time jobs.
John, help me understand. Haven't we been talking about this for years, that these numbers were all lies? That these new job creation numbers were absolute lies? Weren't we doing that for 5 years?
It seems like it.
Yeah, it has been. We'll be right back. Captain John Ragan is with us, and if you'd like to follow along, thefinancialstateoftheunion.com, and please click on the news tab. Captain John Ragan, I just got an email from Scotty Kilmer, and Scotty Kilmer has a YouTube channel, and he talks about cars, and he's a mechanic. Over 4 decades of working and fixing cars, and he's agreed to be on the air with us. I'm all excited about that. And he dislikes some of the engineering that Mercedes-Benz has produced because it's so complicated. And he and I are on the same page. I'm really looking forward to him joining the faculty. So that's Scotty Kilmer of the Scotty Kilmer channel on YouTube. That ought to be a lot of fun. John, what's next?
Well, we left a couple of articles stranded from the end of last hour. Got one called Innocence Fee.
Oh, man,
and
I'm so glad you're doing this.
If you press that link and you get to MSN, they've taken the article off there. You need to refresh my page, and that link will now take you to the original source of the New York Times. So charged a fee for getting arrested, whether guilty or not. The original location of this was in Minnesota. If you're familiar with Minneapolis, St. Paul, this is the county that St. Paul is in. A guy had $46 in his pockets when he was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct. He was released 2 days later. The charges were dismissed. But they kept $25 of his money as a booking fee, returned $21 on a debit card, which has a bunch of fees associated, cost him $7.25 to withdraw what was left of his money. So for never being convicted of any crime, he got back less than $14 of his $46 that he started out with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here's the point to all of those in the law enforcement arena. Please remember that those who you do these things to may not forget. They may not forget what you have done to them. So this guy, Corey Stratum, in Minnesota, charged with disorderly conduct. He missed a couple days worth of work. Okay. Then he's got some explaining to do. Like what happened? It's like if a person falls down and gets a black eye, and the assumption is that person's been in a fight. I walked into a garage door when I was a child. I got a black eye, and everybody thought I was in a fight. I walked into a garage door. So this guy who's been gone for 2 days, his friends, coworkers, associates probably all think that he did something heinous. That's why he was arrested. And naturally, he was guilty. Because why would they arrest him if he weren't guilty, right? And that wasn't the case. He was released. But they stole his money. It's an outrage, John. It's an absolute outrage. And I hope you all remember who does this to you and talk about it and name their names. These people who arrest us are a menace. When they arrest us for doing nothing wrong and steal our money, they are a menace. They're a blight on society. I can't stand it. So, as Janet Reno would say, if you see something, say something. Tell people about these non-convicted criminals who are preying on us. What do you think, John?
Let me just quickly talk about the last one. State of Missouri, starting yesterday, fights at school or on buses will be treated as felonies, which can result to 4 years of prison, fine, or probation. Get your kids out of public school now.
Absolutely. Take them out of the public training camp. If your child is in school. Yeah, fighting on the bus, fighting at school, is now a felony in the state of Missouri. And who figured this out? The alleged representatives. Throw them out, all of them. All of them. Start over.